What is the best album released in January? Well, I'll answer that in this video. I'll be choosing what I personally consider to be the best album released in each month of the year, starting with January and moving all the way up to December. I'll mention all of my potential contenders, choose the best of them, and then I'll give a fun fact that you may or may not know about the winning albums. If you go on to enjoy the video, I'd appreciate your support, a like, subscribe, hype points, and leave a comment. I read and respond to every single one of them. Anyway, let's get on with it! January, the first month of the year. Some people hate it, some people love it. I don't really like it that much. But going back to 1967, we have The Doors by The Doors, a psychedelic rock album released on January 4th. Very influential, very great, a strong contender. Moving on to 1969 though, we have Led Zeppelin by Led Zeppelin, another self-titled album that came out on January 12th. Hard rock, blues rock, another good choice. Then in 1977, we have Animals by Pink Floyd, a darker, more politically charged Pink Floyd album that's become a fan favorite over time. Jump ahead to the 90s, there's The Great Annihilator by Swans, a noisy post-rock, post-industrial record that came out on January 23rd. And entering the 2000s, on January 25th, we got Voodoo by D'Angelo. Rest in peace to the man himself. This album is such a landmark for R&B and neo-soul albums. Then there's Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life, released on January 24th, a cult classic, depressive, atmospheric, mindfuck of an album. And just a few years later, Long Live ASAP by A$AP Rocky drops on January 15th, with catchy, fun, cloud rap beats and good flows from Rocky. Then in 2015, we got Tetsuo and Youth by Lupe Fiasco, released on January 20th, a lyrically strong rap album from Lupe that I see a lot of people praising online. And just a year later, David Bowie drops Black Star on January 8th, his haunting, genius final statement. 2018 gives us Veteran by JPEG Mafia. On January 19th, he gave me one of my favorite experimental rap albums. And finally, on January 17th, 2020, Circles by Mac Miller drops, a beautiful, reflective, posthumous album that closes out this list very well. So now the real question is, of these 11 fantastic albums, which one is the best? And my choice for the best album released in January is... And my fun fact for Death Consciousness is that the band originally recorded these songs with shitty equipment, meant to be a placeholder for the real album, but they ended up liking the tone of these songs more than anything else, so they used the low-quality versions to create this album. And I rate Death Consciousness a 98 out of 100. February, it's the month that's all lovey-dovey because of Valentine's Day. I fucking hate that holiday. Anyway, back to the 70s, we have Pink Moon by Nick Drake. Released on the 25th, it's a pretty folk album with seemingly innocent lyrics, but it's a lot more haunting when you take a deeper look. Then, in 1975, we had Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin. Released on February 24th, Fantano gave this one a 10. It's gotta be good, right? And a few years later, we had Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, a pop rock classic that came out on the 4th. It's just so enjoyable. And then jumping all the way up to 1998, we have In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel, another 10 from Fantano, another classic indie rock album. And just 1 year later, we have Things Fall Apart by The Roots, released on the 23rd. It's an East Coast boom bap classic. And then the year after that, we have Supreme Clientele by Ghostface Killah, my favorite Wu-Tang member and my favorite album of his. And then 4 years later, we got The College Dropout by Kanye. On February 10th, he dropped one of the best albums of the genre for sure. And moving on to Donuts by Jay Dilla, released February 7th, the best album from the best rap producer, in my opinion. Jumping ahead to 2018, we have Twin Fantasy by Car Seat Headrest, released on the 16th, another indie rock album that's already a modern classic. And last but not least, we have Ants From Up There by Black Country New Road, released on February 4th, an instant classic post-rock masterpiece. And yeah, wow, this matchup is no easier than the last one. All 10 of these albums are so strong. Call it recency bias, but my favorite one here is... My fun fact for Ants from Up There is that the first track ever made on the album, Basketball Shoes, was originally based on a sexual dream involving Charlie XCX, so that's how the album began. Luckily, it moved away from that, but it's kind of crazy how that's what started it. And I'm giving Ants from Up There a 100 out of 100. March, probably my favorite month of the year, mainly because my birthday's in March. But going back to the 60s, we have The Velvet Underground and Nico by The Velvet Underground and Nico, released on March 12th, an insanely influential experimental rock album that still holds up to this day. On to 1970, we have Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, released on the 30th, arguably Davis's best album, an hour and a half of pristine jazz. Then in 1973, we have the classic The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, released on March 1st, and I don't even have to describe this one. Into the 80s, we have Master of Puppets by Metallica, released on the 3rd, and one of the heaviest hitting thrash metal albums of all time. Into the 90s, we have Violator by Depeche Mode, March 19th, synth pop classic, it's peak dad music. Moving forward, in 2001, Daft Punk released Discovery on March 12th, and then in 2004, we had Mad Villainy by MF Doom and Madlib. This is my #1 rap album of all time. And then on March 3rd, 2010, we got Plastic Beach by Gorillaz, which has one of my favorite album covers. A few years later, Freddie Gibbs dropped Pinata on the 18th, a modern gangsta rap classic. And then right after that, we have the highest praised album of all time, To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar, March 15th's jazz rap masterpiece. Jumping up to 2022, we have Melt My Eyes, See Your Future by Denzel Curry, released on the 25th, a conscious hip-hop powerhouse of an album. And finally, in 2023, we have Scaring the Hoes by JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown, an experimental mess of a rap album that turned out way better than it ever should have. And wow, these are not getting easier at all. I feel like no matter what I choose, I'm leaving out something very important, but I guess I'm going with...
Just remember all caps when you spell the man name.
My fun fact for Mad Villainy is that during the recording sessions of the album, Doom actually wore his mask while recording his lines. I guess he wanted to stay immersed in that villain character. And yeah, Mad Villainy, a 100 out of 100. April's just kind of a boring month, not gonna lie, and even the music was kinda underwhelming. There's not as many mentions here. Starting all the way up in 1994 with Illmatic by Nas, released on the 19th, essentially the Bible of hip-hop, I had to say it. And the year right after, we have The Infamous by Mobb Deep on the 25th, almost the more haunting, grittier version of Illmatic. It's a boom bap classic. Then all the way to 2011, we have Ex-Military by Death Grips on the 25th. It's Death Grip's debut album. Well, it's technically a mixtape, but I'll count it. And the year right after, Death Grips returns with The Money Store, their first real album that's just as experimental and wild as Ex-Military, and possibly better. Then in 2017, we have a fan favorite, Damn by Kendrick Lamar, released April 14th, a conceptual masterpiece that can be played both forwards and backwards, changing the story depending on the order you listen to it. And finally, in 2020, we have Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple, released on the 17th, proving that she still has her talent after all of those years. And this one has another rap album winning because The Infamous by Mobb Deep is just too good. And my fun fact for The Infamous is that Shook Ones Part 2, the most popular and iconic song, samples Jessica by Herbie Hancock. I'll play the sample here real quick. I can't even hear it, but listen.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love.
I don't know how they turned that into arguably the greatest rap beat of all time, but that just shows their true talent. The Infamous is a 100 out of 100. May. It's the month of spring and blossoming and life or whatever. Anyway, May, I begin this part. Get it? May?
Can I get a McDouble? Hello?
Starting in 1966, we have Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. On the 16th, it's one of the sweetest sounding albums I've ever heard. And then the year right after, in 1967, the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's on the 26th. Then in 1971, we have What's Going On by Marvin Gaye on the 21st. And if y'all know me, there's no need for me to continue this list, but I'll go on just for honorable mention's sake. Like Disintegration by The Cure, released on May 2nd, 1989. It's a post-punk, gothic rock gem. And in 1997, OK Computer by Radiohead came out, the alternative rock banger. Then in 2000, we have the Marshall Mathers LP by Eminem, released on the 23rd, and it has some of the most disturbing lyrics in rap. A few years later, we have B by Common, released on the 24th, a conscious hip-hop classic. And then up in 2013, Daft Punk released Random Access Memories on the 17th. Then a year after that, we have the powerhouse of To Be Kind by the Swans, released on the 13th. It's a post-rock modern landmark. And Daytona by Pusha T dropped in 2018 on May 25th, and the year after that was Igor by Tyler, the Creator on May 17th. Finally, in 2022, on May 13th, Kendrick Lamar released Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And yeah, as stacked as this lineup truly was, I didn't struggle with it much because my number one album of all time is... My fun fact about What's Going On is that the background chatter you hear on the title track, you know, when Marvin Gaye goes, "Hey, what's happening?" and you hear all the blah, 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 blah in the back, it's actually all done by football players. I'm not sure why, but he really wanted to get Detroit Lions players to do the voice lines for the background. I don't know why he did that specifically, but he did. And yeah, What's Going On is a 100 out of 100. June is arguably the most praised month of the year, and I definitely think it's one of the best. I like June. And starting back in 1971, we have Blue by Joni Mitchell, released on the 22nd, one of the most heartbreaking albums ever recorded. Right after that, in 1972, we have The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, released on the 16th by David Bowie, such a classic. And yeah, on to the 80s, we have Purple Rain by Prince, released on the 25th, and then in 1996, we have Reasonable Doubt by Jay-Z. And jumping all the way up to 2013, we have Like Clockwork by Queens of the Stone Age, released on the 4th. And then a few years later, in 2016, we got The Glowing Man by Swans, released on the 17th. It's just more genius work from the Swans. What can I say? Kids See Ghosts came out in 2018 on June 8th. And in 2021, we have Tyler, the Creator's Call Me If You Get Lost. Then in 2024, we have Brat by Charlie XCX, released on the 7th. Another 10 from Fantano. And finally, in 2025, McKinley Dixon dropped Magic Alive on June 6th, a jazz rap banger that will surely go down as an amazing album. And yeah, these are all very strong. I feel like there's a lot that I could choose, but it just feels right to pick. Okay, my fun fact about Purple Rain is that the last 3 tracks, I Would Die For You, Baby I'm a Star, and the title track Purple Rain were all recorded live and just slapped onto the album as the live versions. I guess Prince thought these ones were more immersive and sounded better. I don't know, they turned out pretty well if you ask me. And yeah, Purple Rain is getting a 100 out of 100. July just kind of feels like June, but not as good if you ask me. But yeah, back in 1963, we got The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady by Charles Mingus. One of, if not the best jazz album of all time. And then in 1971, we have Maggot Brain by Funkadelic, released on the 12th, a funk rock essential. Jumping all the way up to the 2000s, we have Is This It by The Strokes, released on the 30th, an indie rock record. It's fire. And then in 2005, we have Sufjan Stevens' Illinois, one of my favorite chamber pop albums ever recorded. And then in 2015, we have the pop rock legendary album that is Currents by Tame Impala, released on the 17th. And a few years later, in 2017, there's Flower Boy by Tyler, the Creator. And the year after, we have Taboo by Denzel Curry. And last but not least, we have a handful of 2025 albums. Y'all know these ones. They're all good, so I wanted to mention them all. And yeah, there's so many good ones here, but let's be honest, the Charles Mingus one is just too hard to beat. My fun fact about the Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is that obviously Charles Mingus wrote and composed this album, but he actually had help from his psychiatrist to write it. I'm not sure why he needed that, but it worked out, so fair enough. And yeah, this one's an easy 100 out of 100. August, it's a month that exists. I don't really know what to say about it. Anyway, shut up. Starting with Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. Released on August 17th, the genius jazz record that came out all the way back in 1959. Then in 1965, we have the classic Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan, the strongest effort from arguably the greatest songwriter in music history. Then, right after that, is Revolver by the Beatles. This has always been my favorite project from them. I'm not sure why. I just like it the most. And in 1973, we have Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye, one of the smoothest sounding soul records of all time. In the late 70s, we have the disco titan that is Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. Released on the 10th, it's my favorite Jackson project and has some of the most feel-good energy from any music. And MJ returns in 87 with Bad, a dance pop classic. And up in 1994, we have Grace by Jeff Buckley. Released on the 23rd, it has fantastic songwriting, fantastic singing, gorgeous instrumentals, everything you can ask for. Then 2 years later, we've got AT-Aliens by Outkast, released on the 27th, potentially my favorite Outkast project to date. And a couple years after that is The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, released on the 25th, one of the greatest R&B rap fusions of all time. Then in 2002, we have Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age, released on the 27th, some more beloved alt-rock. And in 2005, there's Late Registration by Kanye. And then in 2011, there's XXX by Danny Brown, one of my personal favorites. And right after that, there's The Seer by The Swans. Could be the darkest album by them. I don't know, they're all pretty fucked up. And Blonde by Frank Ocean dropped in 2016, a modern R&B masterpiece. A few years after that is Swimming by Mac Miller, my favorite project from him for sure. And into the 2020s, we have The Forever Story by JID, released on the 26th. It's one of the greatest rap albums of the decade, definitely. And finally, in 2024, we have the modern classic Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay, a synth pop, great singing, great writing, all-around fire album. Wow, that was a lot. August definitely has the most honorable mentions yet by far, and a lot of them are albums that I consider perfect, so it's tough to choose, but my gut is telling me to go with... My fun fact for Off the Wall is that the album was originally planned to be called Girlfriend, like the title of the track on the album, but they changed it to Off the Wall because they thought it fit better, and I could not agree more. Not that Girlfriend is like a horrible title, but I don't know, it's just kind of fucking boring. And yeah, Off the Wall is getting a 100 out of 100. 21st night, September. Yeah, back in 1969, we have potentially the most iconic album of all time, Abbey Road by the Beatles. And right after that, in 1970, we have Paranoid by Black Sabbath, a heavy metal landmark. A few years later, there's Close to the Edge by Yes, released on the 13th, one of the weirdest, most unique progressive rock albums that I've ever heard. In 1975, there's Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, an all-time great of an album. Unbelievable, the year right after that is Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, a funky, soulful, beautiful album packed with nearly 2 hours of flawless content. Then we have two mentions in 1991. First, The Low End Theory by A Tribe Called Quest, the jazz rap masterpiece, and then Nevermind by Nirvana. So yeah, Nirvana, we're just creating new genres now, I guess. That's insane. And Outkast dropped Aquemini in 1998, and the Fishman's Live album dropped in 1999. Then we have three mentions for 2001, being The Glow Part 2 by The Microphones, Toxicity by System of a Down, and The Blueprint by Jay-Z. By the way, 2 out of 3 of these albums came out on 9/11. Anyway, in 2007, we have Graduation by Kanye West. It's too iconic to not mention it. And in 2009, we have Man on the Moon by Kid Cudi. A handful of years after that, in 2015, there's The Game Changer, Rodeo by Travis Scott. Released on the 4th, it's the best trap album of all time, in my opinion. And the year after, we have Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown, one of my favorite rap albums of all time. Skip ahead to 2021, and finally, we have Sometimes I Might Be Introvert by Lil Little Sims, an important modern conscious hip-hop project. Now, once again, there's so many picks here. My answer really could change depending on the day, but right now what I'm feeling is... My fun fact about Wish You Were Here is that on the track Have a Cigar, they got Roy Harper to do the vocals. He is not in Pink Floyd. He was never in Pink Floyd, and he never comes back. They just got him on this one fucking track for some reason. It's like they just grabbed some random dude, like, hey, you want to come be on our song? As if they weren't, like, one of the biggest rock bands of all time. I don't know. Wish You Were Here is definitely a 100, though. Ooh, spooky October. Fuck all that shit. Back in 1965, there's Pastel Blues by Nina Simone. It's essentially the origins of R&B right here. And in 1968, we have Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix, the best album from the greatest guitarist in history. And just a year later, there's In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, released on the 10th. It's a prog rock essential. Into the 80s, we have Remain in Light by Talking Heads, released on the 8th, the funky, groovy, post-punk milestone. Up in 92, we have Love Deluxe by Sade, some of the best smooth soul music to date. And a few years later, we have Soundtracks for the Blind by Swans, released on the 29th. My favorite Swans project. It's weird, it's disturbing, it's beautiful, and if you haven't heard it, you just won't get it. Then we've got the rap classic, Black on Both Sides, in 1999, and in 2000, we have three extremely strong contenders. First up is Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven by Godspeed You, Black Emperor. Second is Kid A by Radiohead. And third is Stankonia by Outkast. All of which are fantastic, important, and immensely enjoyable albums. Then in 2006, My Chemical Romance released The Black Parade on October 23rd. And in 2007, there's In Rainbows by Radiohead. Jumping up to 2012, there's Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar, the conceptual masterpiece with top-tier storytelling. And in 2018, we have The Haunting, You Won't Get What You Want by Daughters, a disturbing noise rock experience. And finally, in 2021, we have Offline by JPEG Mafia, one of the most highly praised experimental hip-hop projects of all time. Whew! So many strong choices, so many right answers, but at the end of the day, there's rarely anything that beats... I guess my fun fact for Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven is that currently, as I'm recording this, Sleep, the third track on the album, is the second highest rated song in history. It actually was number 1 like a few days ago, but I just checked back now and apparently it's number 2 and it may fall down, but I don't know. I don't have anything else. Please just reason with me. But yeah, that album is definitely a 100. November! It's November right now. Honestly, it's kind of an interlude month between Halloween and Christmas, but that's just me. But yeah, back in 1968, we have The Beatles by The Beatles. It's the White Album, a classic, necessary one within the Beatles catalog. And in 1971, we have Led Zeppelin 4 by Led Zeppelin, released on the 8th. It's my personal favorite of the series and the group's best album in my opinion. In 1979, there's The Wall by Pink Floyd, just a timeless classic. And then in 1982, we have the most iconic album in the history of music, Thriller by Michael Jackson. It's just hit after hit after hit, an all-time great. Ahead in 1991, there's Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, a shoegaze essential, and a few years later, in 1993, there's the classic Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, one of the most important rap albums to date. And in the late 90s, there's When the Pawn by Fiona Apple, what I consider to be her best work. And in 2010, Kanye released My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Is it a 10? Is it a 6? Who the fuck knows? A Tribe Called Quest released Thank You for Your Service in 2016, a phenomenal closer to what I consider to be the greatest rap group to ever do it. And finally, in 2025, we've got Lux, L-U-X, I don't know how to say it, by Rosalia, a classical, orchestral, strange, beautiful fusion of a record. And yeah, these are all good, very good. I actually have no idea what to pick. I'm just kidding, it's Thriller. I guess my fun fact for Thriller is that it's the highest selling album of all time. It's not really a fun fact. I feel like everyone knows that shit by now. But whatever. Thriller's a 100 and let's just get on with December. Let's get on with it now. jingle bells, jingle all the way. Alright, now that he's gone, let's start off with London Calling by The Clash. Released on the 14th, it's a punk rock necessity, and then with a huge change, we go to The Chronic by Dr. Dre at 92. Dre was such a game changer, and this was his debut solo album, so had to mention it. Way up to 2014, there's 2014 Forest Hills Drive by J. Cole, and then there's Lovesick Hexology by Nujabes. Technically a compilation rather than an album, but it's so special that I just had to include it. And next up, that's actually it. I'm not gonna lie, there's not nearly as many released in December. I guess they're all out doing gifts and shit for Christmas. Yeah, so for the best here, I didn't really struggle to choose. I firmly believe that it's...
London Calling, yes, I was there too.
And my fun fact for London Calling is that the producer, Guy Stevens, was literally throwing chairs around and pouring wine all over the place during the recording sessions. Apparently, he did this to create a rock and roll atmosphere, but I don't know what the fuck that means or how that would accomplish it. I guess it worked though, because this album is good as hell. If I had to rate it, I'd give it like a 93, 92, 94, 94. Good enough. I'm done. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. If you made it here, comment, share to prove you did, and have an amazing day. Goodbye.